As a person who's gained a little bit of an audience by criticizing superhero shows, I think it's only fair to make something very clear. Adapting a comic book into a TV show is hard. Writing and creating a TV show in general is an extremely cutthroat experience. Shows get greenlit and then they record a pilot episode and get canceled almost every week. I don't envy the job of any television writer. On top of that, there are a few different hurdles that come with comic book media in general. I'm sure you could make a list of 100 reasons down in the comments why it might be tough to make a superhero show. And I want to take a little time to talk about 3 of those hurdles. First 2 are going to be me and my nerdy bag, but like always, my final point is my most important, so try to stick around to the end. Part 1. The audience divide. For the most part, there's going to be 2 types of audiences when it comes to watching these shows. And I'm not talking about the age-old debate, the casual fan versus the real comic book fan. Because honestly, a show can take all of the liberties in the world and still end up being really good, and one can follow the comics as closely as possible and end up being trash. The 2 viewer types of these type of TV shows is going to be the procedural television crowd and the continuous story crowd. The continuous story crowd is pretty self-explanatory. Think of shows that are made for streaming. And for procedural TV, think about a show like Smallville or Law & Order. Something different happens every single episode and it doesn't necessarily pertain to the last one. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer when it comes to which one to choose. It honestly all depends on which hero you're making the show about. How much lore does this hero have? And most importantly, what matters is which story are you trying to tell? If you know you want to make a story where your hero learns very specific lessons throughout the seasons, then a contained story might work best. The main caveat for picking the contained story method is those types of TV shows are not meant to last forever. As soon as the hero gets over his main internal struggle, that's usually when the show's gonna end. If you want to make more of a slice of life type TV show where it's not necessarily a continuous ongoing story, but we're just following the hero throughout his life like a show like Smallville, then something more procedural might make more sense. The procedural television format is definitely for those people who like watching traditional TV. For comic book media, it's mainly referred to as the villain of the week format. It's made to go on for as long as possible and it's been used in animated series for years. But I haven't seen it work very well for many live action. A lot of shows nowadays are taking their shot at blending the 2 formats, procedural and contained. Superman and Lois had a lot of success with this. They give you about 15 or 16 episodes per season, so you're getting more than a normal contained story like The Boys, where you only get 8 or 9 episodes per season, but you're not getting that 23 and 24 episodes per season like a Smallville or a Flash. I know Teen Wolf isn't a comic book show, but I mention them because they mastered that blended format extremely well. That was the first time I'd ever seen a show where they basically split their season into 4 parts, which are about 4 to 6 episodes per part. That way they hit that procedural television number that they're trying to hit without stuffing their seasons full of filler. Although it might have been a little bit too late, The Flash also adopted this method last season. The unfortunate truth is whether you choose an ongoing or procedural method, you're going to isolate one of the audiences. But in my opinion, contained or at least blended always works better. Because in this day and age, whether or not your show airs on a network, it's gonna eventually end up on somebody's streaming service. That's where the majority of the people are gonna watch it. For the ones who are still tuning in weekly on cable, if the worst thing one of those people says is, yeah, it was good, but I wish it was longer, then I think you're in a pretty good spot. Part 2. Comic book to TV translation. Even as a comic book fan who loves a good story, cliffhanger, plot twist, or big reveal, the most appealing thing is the art. That's what the majority of a comic book is. Even if you have a large issue that's about 60 pages, it's mostly just art. There'll be a few speech bubbles on each page. So it's nearly impossible to adapt an issue page for page without expanding on it tremendously for TV. The budgets are usually a lot lower than a movie, so it's gonna be a lot more dialogue than action usually. In reality, a comic book series may be a 200-issue story, but it might only end up being 6 months or a year of the hero's life. They can afford to move at a lot slower pace in the comic, so what usually happens in these long-running shows like a Flash or an Arrow or a Smallville is they're not necessarily taking one story and adapting it for a season. They're taking 2, 3, 4 different stories from different writers from different eras and trying to blend them together with their own creative writing and try to make it a cohesive story, and a lot of times it ends up coming out really messy. Part 3. Comic book media's relationship with growth. And this couldn't be more evident in one of my favorite characters of all time, Spider-Man. He has been in the hands of many different writers over the years, had tweaked origins, different personality traits, love interests, story arcs, and so on. But no matter what story is being told with Spidey, there seems to be a real reluctancy with letting him age. Yes, I know there are things like Spider-Man Life Story and even Renew Your Vows that definitely take a more adult tone and let Peter age, and we see Peter get older, but that isn't the norm. The norm is to keep Peter in high school usually. And the thing about that setting is it makes all of his relationships revolve around that aspect. Occasionally we see him go to college, but overall the dynamic of that for him is still pretty similar. The only real difference between high school Peter and college Peter is that Aunt May isn't there to wake him up when he goes to school. As soon as that school chapter of Peter's life is over, the character is inevitably rebooted. Even with the popularity of stories being told like the PS4 Spider-Man game have shown that people are open to an older Peter Parker. Now I know PS4 Spider-Man wasn't pushing 40 like Peter B. Parker from the Spider-Verse movie, but he was definitely in his mid-20s. And it's cool to see that dynamic of his relationships to people in his life while he's not juggling school. That's what had me excited about the future of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised that if in 2 years or so we start hearing rumors that there's going to be a new Spider-Man and it's going to be rebooted and started over and he's going to be right back in high school again. And when you look at some of the shows that I've talked about on my channel like The Flash or Arrow, even though they are in completely different boats, they've suffered from some of those same restraints, not being allowed to grow and evolve. The Flash was insecure about being a leader and a hero for about 7 seasons, and it took Arrow about 6 seasons just to learn to stop pushing people away. That reluctancy to let the hero overcome their big internal hurdle and let us see them on the other side of that really hindered both of those shows. So in terms of a long-lasting TV show, it's so hard to make one involving superheroes because the mindset of the medium as a whole is that it's still for kids, which doesn't make much sense to somebody like me because I check my channel analytics and the largest demographic of people that watch my channel are 18 to 37 years old. The audience for this medium is aging, and it's okay to let the stories do that as well. We don't have to make our heroes overcoming their childish ways and their biggest internal struggles as the jumping off part for a show or a movie series or a comic book series. It's okay to let us see them on the other side of overcoming that struggle. If you want your character to be married, let them be married. If you want your character to be a parent, let them be a parent. And look, I told myself I wasn't going to take any jabs at the Flash in this video because for whatever reason from my last Flash video, people think I hate the show, and I promise I don't. But look, I'm sorry. It is just really weird to see 2 actors who are about the same age yell at each other like adult and child. It would have been fine to let Iris become pregnant and actually have a child. That could have been an element and an angle of the show that they never attacked before. But instead we bring them in from the future and we just get this really strange dynamic that doesn't really make much sense or compute to anybody who's over the age of 15 years old. But I promise, no more Flash digs. I just had to get that off my chest, okay? Eventually, we're gonna have to stop treating comic book adaptations if they're a genre. There's so many different types of stories being told. Detective noir, buddy cop, sci-fi, teen drama, slice of life, fallen hero, action adventures, thrillers, horrors, and just about any other genre you can think of are stories being told using comic book media. Comic book media is a medium. It's not a genre. So until these writers stop putting these unnecessary restraints on themselves, trying to stay stunted and tuned in on a demographic who's constantly aging, we're gonna keep getting this same comic book media loop. Hero is introduced with an internal problem. Hero overcomes problem. Hero is canceled. 3 to 5 years later, Hero's rebooted.